Time to look at a blur, my friends. But not just any blur. Yeah. We've got a CF154 blur from the sharpening bench. Stay tuned, guys. We'll talk about it. Hi gang, Rob here. It's the evening of 27 April 2014, and yes, we do have kind of a special guest blade in tonight from the sharpening bench from my buddy and sharpening customer Doug from Yonkers, New York. This is a 1670 CF154 Kershaw blur. What does that mean? Well, it means we have Kershaw's oldest and dearest test mule for new materials, the Kershaw blur, outfitted instead of with sandpaper or track tech inserts. This time we have gleaming, glistening carbon fiber, which does, as you might expect, nothing for traction, but it sure is beautiful. And frankly, the blur doesn't really need the added traction of its inset panels to be an effective large EDC blade, which is what it is. We're not going to bore you with statistics and dimensions of the Kershaw blur after all these years on this channel. You guys know what this knife is. Ken Onion design, assisted opening, anodized aluminum handled folder from Kershaw, American made, generally out of, oh gosh, in the old days, Sandvik 13C26 steel. Later on, the supposedly improved, at least for corrosion resistance, Sandvik 14C28N. And over the years, we've had some sprint runs in the blur with some higher line steel, some S30V. I think there might have been a D2 blur in there somewhere. In this case, we have another Crucible product, CPM154, which is, as you might guess, the Crucible particle metallurgy or powdered metallurgy version of 154CM. And by all accounts, an absolutely wonderful knife steel. The finer grain and more homogeneous nature of the CPM technology fused into one of the best knife steel recipes or chemistries known to man, 154CM. And, you know, it's pretty cool steel for this knife. I gotta say though, at a price point of $160, $170, $180, man, that's a lot of money to pay for a Kershaw blur. But Doug did it, or at least something close to that. One thing I do love about the blur is the nature of its assisted opening mechanism. You know, it's one of the first assisted openers. Blur's been around for a long time. Edge came out pretty beautiful. Kind of broad though, isn't it, for a 15 degrees per side secondary bevel? I was kind of surprised by that. That means this knife, this particular version, this particular piece in my hand, was ground pretty thickly behind the edge, which isn't something I'm used to seeing on a blur, frankly. Don't know why, but it was. But it's thin and mean now. And, you know, as you might expect, 154CM is a steel that takes an absolutely razor sharp, scary edge, and the CPM version apparently no different. I would say it probably took knife wipe coming up might have taken a little more work to get there than 154CM, but some of that could be just due to the amount of material I had to take off due to the sort of broad shoulders of this particular edge grind. But back to this mechanism, one reason that I really like the blur's mechanism, not that it operates that well with the left hand, we'll switch it over, is that the assist stops with the blade about 90 degrees from open, which makes it very easy to close one-handed. You know, you almost close it just like you would any other liner lock. You know, it's not like you have to hang on to it with one finger while you're bringing the thumb around. You just push it to 90 degrees, go ahead and change grips. No muss, no fuss, not a high stress deal. It just works well. You know, some assisted openers, some of the SOG knives, there's tension on that spring all the way to lock. So it makes it very awkward to, you know, kind of switch fingers in midstream. I love the Blur's Assist as assisted opening mechanisms go. Handsome blade too, isn't it? I'm glad that they didn't black coat this blade. Their stonewash over bead blast is so attractive. And the little, you know, the hints of gray or silver in the carbon fiber work so well with that stonewash blade. The Blur has always been an attractive knife. You know, we sharpeners don't love it because the base of the edge is a little tough to do. The recurve presents a bit of a problem. But usually we end up with a really nice slicer when we're done. Mechanically, this knife is perfect, this particular knife. The blade centering is absolute perfection. Action is plenty quick. Blade play is absolute zero in both directions. Slick and smooth and sound and tight and solid. What more could you want from a folding knife, huh? Well, there's one thing you could want. You could want it to cut, huh? Every time I do a from the sharpening bench video and I cut paper with the knife after I sharpen it, I always get one comment from somebody that'll say, "You never show any of the before. What was it like before you sharpened it?" Well, this is your night. So stick with me. Coming up next, what the knife looked like before. Stay tuned. Okay guys, I'll try to get you some close-ups of this edge before we start sharpening. And the other side. This Blur has had some sharpening done. Pretty dull right now. Got a little grab to it. There's a little toothiness. Let's see how it cuts. That's not fair. That's the torn edge. Okay. That's about as good as it's going to do. Okay, what we had there was a knife that had had some use. It appears as though Doug or somebody else had made an attempt to sharpen it, and you know, kind of what was revealed later, this kind of broad-shouldered knife behind the edge, it got pretty frustrating for somebody, and I think perhaps more harm was done to that old cutting edge than good at some point. So we kind of start from a clean slate here. We wiped away some of that broad-shouldered behind the edge material. We got a proper secondary bevel on it and a tiny little 19-degree micro bevel. And let's see what initial sharpness looks like coming off the old bench here. And I think it's pretty good. Yeah, nearly silent. Yeah, really nice. Not a snag, not a tear. And a nice clean S-curve. That's pretty rare for a knife this broad to be able to cut an S-curve in limp paper without binding or snagging. You know, it's usually either the thickness of the knife. I've got a nasty little piece of paper here. It's usually either the thickness of the knife or the broadness of the blade when you start trying to make that curve that stops it in the paper. So for this to be able to do that without binding, I think it's pretty neat. I told Doug when I texted him when I received the knife that mechanically this was one of the nicest blurs I had seen, and I stick by that. I didn't see at the time that we had a little thickness behind the edge issue, but we certainly cleared that up, didn't we? If you guys are Kershaw fans, especially if you have a blur collection, so to speak, this is probably one you're going to want to have because the steel is absolutely superb. I have run across this on some Striders, the CPM154. It behaves very nicely. For me, I don't, you guys know I'm not a big enough Kershaw or Kai fan, probably to invest $170 or so in a carbon fiber CPM154 blur. So I'm really happy that Doug sent me one to work on and bring before you guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and the craftsmanship is superb. One of the great things about buying an older design, whether it be a knife or a car, something that a company has been building for a long time and they're still building, you can usually bet that the bugs are worked out. And there are no bugs in this blur. Just a beauty. Classic and up to date and working great. That's all for tonight, my friends. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And remember, the Word and Doug's blur are sharp.